Hey everyone, Turtle Angelo here for another episode of Braving Bhakti. Unfortunately, we had some technical difficulties with this recording, and somehow the intro and initial question were cut off. So, per usual, I'm joined by the lovely Vidarbha, and we actually also have Dr. Suni Jani again. We had so much fun last time, we asked her to come back, and I have a feeling we're going to keep her as long as we can. So, hopefully, you guys are enjoying the three of us together. All right, so today we're talking about those moments in life where, frankly, life really tests you, whether you have a spiritual or faith practice or not. I think there's moments in life that make you question everything. Why am I doing this? Is this even working? I don't feel anything. Or sometimes we're hit by really tragic events that sort of rock our faith in God or faith in humanity, or we get thrown into the throes of existential crisis. So we're jumping right in to Vidarbha's response to this very query.
It's a very good question and a very relevant experience for practitioners across the board. You read different practitioners, even Christian saints, and many will say the same thing, that there are dry spells. It's to be expected. And when you just factor that in, what I have found is that a dry spell, if I can sort of go through that in a mood of prayer and just staying there, sometimes that's all we are expected to do, is just hang in there and just show up. I was just reading the other day that how courage is not the absence of fear, right? Courage is, standing up despite the fear. So same way, faith is not the absence of doubt, but faith is showing up despite the doubts, and just doing it every day. And another thing I heard one of my very favorite teachers say one time is that sometimes, shops, when they want to like sell a product, like some, a sweet shop or a bakery, they'll have a man stand outside and give small samples, and you
Mm.
eat that and you go, oh, that's really good. And then you're like, can I get some more? And he's like, no, you got to come in and pay the price now. So, in the beginning, it's like we always laugh, Loka and I, like we would drive and be like, oh, I wish we could get this parking spot. And boom, you get this parking spot, right? And he was like, can I get this? And it's like, Krishna is just inundating us with such rich experiences. And then we may go through times when he may say, okay, do you still want to be around if those experiences are not there? Like, how do you respond, And I think I could go on, but I guess I'll take a pause here and see, if you guys want to add something.
Yeah, I guess my take on it would be that being in a faith is sort of committing to changing a big part of yourself. And so you could even secularize that concept and be like anything we want to change about ourselves. I think you'd mentioned like weight loss, psychological changes, trying to engage in better, healthier behaviors, whether it's like a relationship to God or like participating actively in a faith-based pathway, or just who you eventually become as a person in any other way. I think there's always dry spells, and I think there's huge challenges. I think people that decide to approach a loved one differently, similar to how you approach God differently, that there's moments there where you go, oh my gosh, I don't feel this right now. Like, I know I'm doing this to better my relationship with another human being or a divine being, but I think there's just ultimately like periods of exhaustion, periods of dry spells when you're having this emotional energy, you're committing to anything. And then sometimes I think we can doubt ourselves, not just in faith, but with people. And then we make choices of whether we're pursuing this or not, or we change our pursuit at times. Sometimes you do sit down for like a daily commitment, and because it feels stale, you might change the way that you commit yourself again. Or you actually going back and challenging I think is a healthier type of growth, and going, is this really for me? Am I meant to do this? Does this make sense? And if you don't really like come from it from a genuine place, then it really can feel stale and meaningless. At least that's personal experience. If anything, is like doubting makes it stronger.
I like that. Yeah. Well, and to your point of bringing up, like weight loss or anything that requires some discipline, I think,
when something's new, and I have to actually interrupt what I'm about to say in that some people are raised with some kind of faith, like they may be changing their spiritual practice or their religion or whatever, or they may be in a very long standing, like a lifelong standing practice that was introduced to them by their parents. And I don't have that history. So I guess what's a little bit unique about my situation is that the entire concept of having a relationship with God is like new to me,
Okay.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think there's absolutely a bit of testing, there's a bit of like trying to figure out, well, what does it feel like to lean into this relationship and to have faith and to have trust, and what does that actually look like? Because my frame of reference is the human world, which, we all know how fraught with fragility that is.
Yeah.
That's true. I was actually, to Suni's point, and I think it's also connected to what you're saying, Turtle. What came to my mind was my relationship or my response to my son when he was born.
Mm,
And, there are for sure, it's a relationship that's like implicit and it's just there. And like you cannot really ignore it because, you've got to take care in some ways. And then it's not fun all the time, right, Suni? There are times when you have like, you stay up all night and you go like, what did I sign up for? And I remember like when I didn't sleep for 2.5 years, and I thought this was my life going forward. So, and yet it's a relationship that is so deep and it's so sweet, right?
Yeah.
And there's this one little smile that the baby just suddenly one day smiles at you and you go, oh, it's all worth it. And I think it's something similar, when we are we're trying to engage in our spiritual practices and pray, and it seems like nothing is happening. And then there is this one moment, and that one moment is worth all these other dry spells, and it keeps you going. And
mhm.
it keeps
Yeah,
deepening.
I like that, because it's so true. In any relationship that we have, of course, there's periods that I think are trying, and then there's also periods that are just sort of maybe uneventful or unremarkable, and then of course there's the very joyous moments, or moments where you maybe feel an abundance of love.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, and I think also to that there is, like I think we talked about this last time too. We put so much pressure and expectation on all relationships, and I
Mm,
feel that also gets carried over in our relationship with God, where it's like every moment, there has to be something going on for it to be working, and sometimes it's not. It's like, okay, here we are together again, and we get to spend time, and that in itself is enough. It doesn't have to be some kind of a, cinematic moment, just every day. you
I
know.
also think we might be comparing relationships to God based on the way we compare relationships in real life in a way. So people can have a personal and an impersonal relationship. Some people could definitely be like, well, there's God and I talk to God and like God talks back and I know God's likes and I know God's dislikes. And some people are like, I just have a feeling that's difficult to explain and it just bathes over me and that's the explanation. And then some people go, I don't think I'm quite either. I think I'm really searching. And then you might have moments where you just go, wait, are one of those the right way? Those people seem really confident. And you do that in a relationship as well. People
yes.
judge marriages that way, mother-daughter relationships, father-son, like all kinds of different connections. We seem to have an expectation and we might be basing it off of others. And then when we don't match our own expectations, we get extra harsh on ourselves as well, especially if you're saying, I don't really have a framework and I'm not sure what that relationship looks like. There's just so many types of relationships out there that I wish there wasn't a framework for because the natural way is actually idealized, but we often keep ourselves from it.
Yeah, well, I mean, you brought up exactly what happens with me is the comparison. I'm looking at other people and saying, well, what do they do? What does it look like for them? And of course I can't even really know. I'm only basing it on what they express, which I think is like a fraction of what their own personal experience is. And so, yeah, sometimes, I mean, going back to this like sort of testing of faith, or just little mini earthquakes to my faith, is showing up at Sangha and hearing somebody's story about their amazing session chanting, and they started crying, and I'm just going, that doesn't happen to me, you know.
Me neither. Yeah.
And I think that also speaks to, sorry, go ahead.
No, it was just
Yeah.
an errant go for it.
Yeah, I was just saying that that also shows that each relationship, and I think just Suni was saying, each relationship is unique and it's individual, and it'll always be different from the other. And I also think basing it on other people's perceived growth will also shake us when we see them maybe glide down in some way.
Oh my God.
So, right, basing our, so our faith has to, we have to own and reclaim our own faith, and it has to be our own journey. And I, one thing that helped me a lot along the way is to always remind myself that it's not a, it's not, I don't have to finish it, it's not a race, you
Mhm.
know. And we bring in this whole sort of achievement mindset that I have to finish it in, like, 2 years or whatever. And it I could not imagine how one could put so much pressure on a relationship. It would not happen even in a mundane relationship, right? To put that much pressure on yourself, I gotta
Right.
love you and you gotta love me, and we gotta make this work. How does that happen? You have to, like, sort
Yeah.
of take a deep breath and let it grow, right? As long as we are doing the right things, then I guess it'll naturally grow into something deeper.
Isn't there such a human need to like put levels on something?
Yeah.
Like, in our relationships, you're dating, then you're like boyfriend, girlfriend, then you get married. That what like we
Yeah.
have these levels. And then in spirituality and even religion, we're like, oh, you're initiated, and then you're this level initiate, and then and it's like, oh my God, does that pull at my little achievement oriented heart?
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, next, I can do this. I can do it. Look, I got an A, That means me and God are super tight.
It's so true though. I don't I really just, I don't know, maybe it's my own, like I think I can share, like I haven't gotten initiated. I'm not there. I think it's one of those things that I want to pursue when I feel like I'm worthy, not when anyone else tells me I am, or if I feel like I'm down that path. I definitely feel like I'm bad at this a lot. And because I know there's days, like since having a baby, chanting is basically impossible. If I'm with my work schedule, like I'm so lucky if I can make it to a sangha, or with my sleep schedule right now, I'm so lucky if I can make it to anything. Just listening to stuff is kind of where I am. I used to be able to do artwork, but I had to abandon that in the light of work and sleep deprivation. and and so I have moments where I'm like, well, I guess it looks like I'm stepping away, or I'm not doing as much, but I'm doing something differently. Like I have a chance to be here and talk about this, or my husband and I have discussions separately, or I'll listen to someone else's podcast, or listen to someone talk on YouTube, or even like revisit children's stories with my son. Am I doing like proper sangha? Am I like going up? No, I'm in some free fall. I'm in a random set of decisions, but in my own interpretation of it, I think some people might look at me and go, "Oh, no, she should not be initiated. Like, don't even try it. Like, this is not for you right now." But in my own sort of personal relationship, I'm like, I'm trying. It's like we're in a relationship, and I'm doing what I can do with what I have, and my intention's there, and I'm not doing any harm. So I feel like I've got some version of something growing and being worked on. And it's just one of those things, like it looks like a step back, but it's just a step in a different way or different direction. And I think even people who step back, from my understanding of the faith, they're never truly gone if we're all really a part of Krishna, if we're all beloved by Krishna. There's people who technically do like the polar opposite of regulatory principles, who are no part of this in any capacity. And I've never heard it said like, oh, but Krishna now has forsaken them or not cared for, because there's nothing. So even if someone says, I feel like I don't have a relationship with Krishna, my understanding's always been Krishna's never said he doesn't want to have one back or doesn't feel one back. So I think wherever people decide to go, they're still in a way here, no matter how they feel. Not to say that in like a forceful, like that they're a part of this. It's just there's different levels of love and attachment and that kind of thing. And how they feel is just one step of a journey that, I think is thought to be a part of many lifetimes. And that's okay. It's you're still all right.
Yeah, I love that. I think it's what honestly the biggest attraction to bhakti and to yoga that I had was it's very open. And I think that the message I've received anyway is, yeah, your practice is going to be unique to you, and it's going to be as intense as you want it to be, or as, casual, I guess, for lack of a better term, you want it to be. And I think I'm trying to will myself to lean into the fact that it can actually be this really unique expression of yourself. Because something that I struggled with when I first got into it was trying to orient myself around like my personality and what I'm like in the world, and how that translates in bhakti. So I'm a very passionate individual. I have a lot of energy, and it felt wrong in comparison to bhakti. And so I really needed to figure out or reconcile, like, okay, what do you do with all this ambition? What do you do with all this passion? All that stuff. And Vidarbha was very helpful in helping me kind of understand that I can, like, that won't go away. That's my makeup in this material world, that it's more about channeling it and focusing it in the right direction and stuff like that. So but you see, I mean, going back to the achievement oriented, like I have a lot of ambition. So you show me levels, and I don't know how to not strive for them. But then I lose in that. It becomes more like technical or like accomplishment, as opposed to actually building a relationship of the heart. Like I don't fall in love with math, like.
Yeah, I think I was just thinking when I was, hearing both of you, and I was just reflecting that it's amazing that how bhakti is both. That on the one hand, it has this, broad space where, if this is my little offering of a little leaf or a little water, and if it's done with devotion, then that Krishna accepts it, and there's nothing. I mean, it's as simple as that. And yet, there is this other side of bhakti where it's such a discipline, and just like any other yoga practice or learning a violin, or if you really want to like really get into it, there's a whole map. I mean, I think you mentioned that the stages, there's actually, and that was one thing that really really fascinated me, were to see all these different stages of bhakti, and they've been delineated like with so much precision, like at each stage what to expect, what are the obstacles that one is going to encounter. And so it's just a detailed science, and one can walk on that in a very precise manner, and then one will see that it'll unfold into the spontaneous love that is dormant. So it's both. And just like you're riding a bicycle, it's the reason we can ride a bicycle or learn how to ride a bicycle and it becomes second nature, is because it's innate to us. So in that sense, like what Suni was saying, right, it's innate. Like, how do you go away from something that is innate to you, right? As you were
Yeah.
saying, Krishna is always there and you're always going to be part of Krishna. And yet, in order to revive that, there is a practice which is much more. But one can, as you were saying, Turtle, that what one can decide at what level one wants to take up that practice, right?
Yeah.
And just and be happy. Another thing I heard. I'm sorry for taking this so long, but another thing I heard was that the way you do it is like climbing a ladder, which is kind of interesting because you were talking about a ladder. But
Yeah.
in this example, you stay on on a particular rung and just find your firm footing and be happy there and be
Mhm.
content, be satisfied. And then when you feel ready and you feel like, oh, I would like to, take it up a
Mhm.
notch, you do it at your own pace, not because there's some fire underneath or there's someone else at the top, saying, move fast, move fast. No, it's your journey. So it's kind of, it brings everything together.
Yeah. And that's very much, I feel, how our personal relationships with humans is like, right?
Yeah,
You spend time with someone, and then when you feel like I want to be closer, you discuss it with each other, like,
yeah.
uh, and I think, well, I guess going back to my point of, I I love this idea of it being an expression of yourself, or like an opportunity to find the uniqueness of who you are in your own practice. I guess I'm
Mm,
probably not articulating this very well, but like there's almost a beauty and a strength simply in the fact that maybe your practice looks like, you just think about Krishna all day, or you have pictures of him around your house, but like your daily chanting is off and on and stuff like that, or maybe your practice is you talk to him instead of chanting or something like that, and that there's not really any pressure that you follow this specific recipe. um, that, like Suni says, it's there, it's there, he's there, it's there, and your relationship can look however it looks.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I think even
That's
last time we talked, Suni said even when you're mad, you could be angry at Krishna, and he likes that because you're thinking of him.
Yeah.
yeah, it's true. It's true, and that's beautiful. Yeah.
So what about, like, I don't know if you guys have had any moments where your faith was really tested, like, maybe like a death in the family, or something tragic happening where you're just like, I guess, really mad at at Krishna.
All of the above. Yeah, definitely. Um, you do. I think those are like those moments where I have that dysfunctional, fun, angry relationship with Krishna, where I'm just like, oh my gosh, like I've really, and it's not, I really in no way would ever want to be elitist to be like, oh, because I pursued this, I'm at a higher plane, or I'm magically better, or so. No, I'm just as human as anyone who doesn't want to have faith. In the sense of, oh my gosh, I'm doubting everything I knew. I'm just doubting the values I had for a second. What did it all matter? Those are like, you get these intense moments of what is serving me. And I think that's a faith or no faith personal crisis experience. And I think in the context of faith, you're thinking of it in this massive relationship to like the universe, the supreme, what's really out there. So you feel like this extra level of, oh my gosh, I was trying to believe in goodness in the world.
Mm,
And it can be very shattering. And then I think each of us has our own explanation when we're in the recovery process. So it's like it's like an angry moment in that relationship. It's like you're having a fight, you're having a disagreement, because of something you went through and you think it's like, oh, it's because of this. I mean, I put so much into this decision
mhm,
in a faith to follow, and I was let down. So obviously it's that relationship I have that did it. Whereas this part of me is like, hold on, calm down. Like, you're a person and you've definitely contributed to some of these issues. And also some things, like death happens, like how it happens can feel unfair. The suddenness, the like
yeah.
trauma of it can make us want to question the supreme and the divine. But there is not there's not something, you can have, like, I think, a bend, and it can even feel like a break, but nothing's really shattered there once you have that opportunity to pull your thoughts back together. And it's the same way you would have in a relationship where someone indirectly had something to do with harm happening, but when you really calm down and think it through, it's like, it wasn't that person's fault that it rained and a branch fell on my roof. I guess
Right.
maybe they just like could have trimmed the branch, but like, I also wouldn't have seen that coming. But there's like moments where you blame everyone, the people, the divine, situations, the weather, like everything can really hit you when you're in those spiral moments. So it's just about, I think at the end of the day, for me, it was like, how did I want to build it back? Did I want to build it back? Did I want to give it a second chance? And that part does fall on me personally and how I want to cope with it. And some people might go, I'm walking away from the whole thing. It was too traumatizing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's it's, again, I come back to the fact that some people have like a lifelong relationship of some kind, and because my mind is still, I guess, orienting to what is this relationship like and what does it mean? And again, how do I lean into that? I was having a discussion with a friend of mine once, and so there's this concept of like Krishna's got your back or God's got your back, right? And I was like, well, what does that look like exactly?
Yeah.
Because some people are they grow up as children. They have to grow up really quickly, and they're essentially forced into a self-sufficiency that can be really hard to believe anything has your back or anyone, or so I think that's another big testing point in the relationship building with Krishna, is like, well, what does it mean that you have my back? And is this a currency thing? And like, oh, if I follow these rules, if I follow this recipe for how I show my devotion to you, then you have my back? Or do
Like
you just have my back?
Yeah. Wow. That's amazing. I really love your, the way you're putting it out. Yeah. It's such a, I mean, first of all, Krishna always has our back. Like Suni was saying, right? Whether even if someone goes, completely on the other side, we're still part of him. At the same time, I feel that when we go through a crisis like that, it's like holding on, when you hold on tight to your friend's hand and you're kind of walking along, you have him walking alongside you, then you can understand that situation so much more. There is a beautiful segment in one of the Bhakti texts, which is one of my favorite segments, and it is about Krishna coming back in the evening, uh, when it's kind of a little bit dark, and it's dusk time, and he's coming back with his cows, and the cows are raising this dust, which is creating this kind of like a storm, like a dust storm. So the cowherd damsels, they are standing on the other side. They're watching for Krishna to come, but they don't see Krishna. All they're seeing is the dust storm, and it's dark. And so they can't see Krishna, but through that dust storm, they know that Krishna is right there. So I find that such a beautiful way to understand this crisis mode, is that to the extent that we can see the hand of Krishna, that's actually what we see before we see Krishna. So it's a practice, it's an art, it's a science of learning to see Krishna's hand. And as you do that, you sort of build your muscles along the way, and it happens the first time and you go, no way, there cannot be any God if this happened. And then you stay with that, and you go through that, and then you look back and you go, oh, now I see where you were and how you were holding me. And it happens over and over again. Just another little story. There is a story of this little boy who was thrown off a cliff, and I heard this from a wonderful devotee scholar, who said that when he's being thrown off the cliff, he's actually held at the very bottom of the cliff. So he's actually falling down the cliff, and that distance from the top of the cliff to the bottom of the cliff is basically the length or the measure of our faith. So for someone like me, I would be like, okay, as soon as I'm done, okay, Krishna, you're going to hold me, right? And then I'm like, oh, I hope you're around. You're hearing me, and it's like, not sure if you're around. with this little boy.
Krishna.
Why did I even bother with you? But so I think it's a building of faith, through all of these different crises. They're really meant, it's not meant for any other reason, but just to build our faith muscle, and see that actually Krishna is there, and he doesn't let us down. And you can speak to devotees who've been practicing for some time, and they'll all attest that he comes through. It may take us time to understand how he came through, but he does come through.
But Turtle, in the context of what you were bringing up with like someone who's rapidly parentified because they had to grow up and they had this, it's the type of trauma to feel like you had no one to have your back, or you were forced to experience things that you weren't ready to process. Like a lot of the therapy and recovery for that involves not just blind faith in God, but blind faith in people. So you have to that's like a huge part of kind of undoing some of the damage from rapid parentification is learning how to trust again, not feeling like everything is a transaction. Like if I do something for you, will you do something for me? And that knowing somewhere out there, somebody can kind of give you this comfort or this assurance that you're being unconditionally accepted as you are, and there's no one or nothing you have to do. And it's a personal journey for anyone going through therapy for something like that, to kind of know who are my people, how do I really feel, how do I learn to trust in the first place, what do I know as warning signs, and so as people kind of work through that cognitively, it helps us in the material world. But I think one of like the speed runs in the spiritual world is you can have that doubt, but like you can also have this assurance at the end of the day that like, oh my gosh, no, Krishna really loved me. He like I was loved first, and now I have this opportunity, if I choose this path, to express my love in return. And then even through difficult times that happen in the world in general, you get to have this faith that actually Krishna might be doing this in my best interest in a way that's not immediately apparent. And that's like one of those cognitive reframings, if you look at it with just a day-to-day process where maybe someone's a little bit negligent in the relationship, but then later they're like, I was sneaking off, but I was like making you something, and here it is now. And you're like, oh my, I have like 6 months of paranoia around this. Whereas when you're having like a personal issue that feels like it's very much the universe has brought this in, at least, somewhere, somehow I can work towards seeking a lesson, because that's kind of our role in it, but then also know something's coming of it that is ultimately very comforting or rewarding, whether it's this situation or a different situation that turns out to be Krishna kind of extending it back. I think that's what makes it a little bit more of a, not like a direct, there's not a transaction, there's not having to prove yourself. Like a lot of that fear that's innate to someone is really hard to let go. It's really hard.
Well, sometimes I see Krishna in my own resiliency, if that makes sense. Like, for sure, various teachers have indicated and spoken to the fact that it's not like Krishna means all good things, that his divine plan or his will can be expressed in many ways, and that might mean that something bad happens or something difficult happens, or you have to move through something challenging, because that is either the way to get to where you're going, or because you're trying to be rerouted, So I think there was like I loved the message that Krishna can be found in every experience, no matter how you've decided to label it, sad, angering, happy, joyful, etc. But that, I guess, led me to looking at my own resiliency and saying like, okay, well, I'm still here. So like nothing's taken me down. And I'm guessing that means that Krishna's got my back, right? Because
That's very beautiful. Also, I feel that faith sometimes feels like work. It feels like it's something that I'm giving to Krishna. But in reality, it's just like what you were saying, Suni, that, like, how do you, like, in order to lean in, it's like you need to spend time. Like, say, if I'm going through something, and that's the time when I need that embrace more than at any other time. And it's just that. It's just like, it's just taking the time to allow that relationship to come in and let to be embraced by Krishna. And that's all it is. It's not that I have to do these things and then I'll be accepted, but it's just being in that space where we will automatically be embraced. And that's, to me, that's all faith is. And yeah, that's what chanting is to me. Is whenever I go through, and I have gone through, different ups and downs, and I find that if I just allow myself to enter into the space where I am sitting with Krishna, and Krishna's there, then there is a lot of healing that happens in a very natural way, without much effort. It's just very natural. So
That's really ringing true for me as well. So I remember there was definitely a transitional period when I was younger, like, teenager becoming an adult, and like starting to have personal relationships, and like affection was something that was difficult for me. Like it didn't come naturally. And it's not that, like, so my expression of affection was more like through words and stuff, not like physical touch or like hugs and things like that. So I kind of got this reputation of like turtle doesn't hug, and but it was really just that I had to learn how to do it, and so I think that's exactly what you were just saying, Vidarbha, is like you go into the practice to learn how to be in the space, I think, to receive love
yeah.
from Krishna.
Yes.
And you have to do that with people too.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
So
And it requires us to be vulnerable, and that's very difficult. Like, even with Krishna, I feel that, in all other ways we can sort of walk around and say, all right, I'm this person, that person. But I find that the times when I'm just chanting, those are my most vulnerable and raw moments, because there are no filters, and it's me and my doubts and my crisis, or whatever it is that I'm bringing to the table, right? And I find that as I do that, when I allow myself to be seen, then there is a lot of healing that happens very naturally.
yeah, it's funny. I'm going to deviate us for a second here. When I sit down to chant, I got to be honest, that is like hands down my most creative moment of the day. And I feel so bad because I'm like, I'm trying to sit there and like talk to Krishna. And my mind is just like, oh, and you could do this and you could do that. And then
Yeah.
it's like, I'm like, okay, but can you like hold that thought, but put it in the back,
I think there's something to be said, though. Go ahead,
Yeah.
Suni. I want to hear from
Oh
you.
no,
Yeah,
I was going to say, what if that creativity is Krishna talking? What if that's what it is?
I hope so. Because
Because you're like ready to talk, and he's like, no, I'm excited. I got stuff to share with you. Here you go. There's just
yeah.
an angle on it. I don't know.
for the past 2
Yeah,
weeks,
I mean, I've noticed that myself, and I was thinking that, because I was watching a video about like the flow zone, and probably Suni might be able to tell us more about it. There's actually a space where you can enter, where you can be really creative, and there's something about chanting that takes you in that. Like, especially as I write these days, I find that actually I've made this my practice, that I first chant and then I sit down to write, because it flows much more when I've gone through that. When I put myself in that space.
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it's one of those it's one of those doubts though, like I'm sitting down, I'm trying to do this thing, and you read in like the text, like you want to pay attention and focus on your chanting, and it's like the hardest thing in the world because I have all these ideas popping up. So but I like that. I'm gonna take it as messages from from Krishna.
I really think it is sometimes, because I feel like chanting is like the place where I'm ready to focus, and I'm like, no, everything's coming at once, and sometimes I just look at it like, these are things I need to resolve, like I need to do something, and then or you do, what they talk about in dialectical behavioral therapy, which is like that mindfulness-based therapy where you can look at you can be angry, but then you have this ability to step back and look at anger as I am going through anger. Like you can have it and also look back, and it's one of the skills they teach in it. And sometimes I feel that way with chanting, where like I am having a thought. Okay, let's keep this thought. I'm having it during chanting. I'm sure I will keep chanting, but I will simultaneously be aware non-chanting actions are occurring, and it has meaning, or it's either I'll work on it, or this could be Krishna or something, or it's just kind of points back to that unique relationship each of us have, that like not master chanters, not everyone is. Not everyone is. Some people are like, this is my happy space. Some people are like, this is about to show me a whole world that I'm not ready for right now. And I always look at both as valid. I think we have to.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you guys so much for talking to me today. This has been really awesome. Lots of golden nuggets for me to chew on over the next week.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So
Yeah.
wonderful to get together and talk about stuff, that we all go through, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We'll do it again next week then.
Definitely.
All right, everybody. As usual, you know the drill. Like and subscribe if you want to keep the channel going. And we're happy to explore your questions too. So feel free to use the comment section to let us know your thoughts. And if you have any questions yourself, or you're new to your own practice, or maybe you've been doing it for a really long time and you have some advice you want to share, we're open to everything. So thank you so much, and we'll see you next time. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.